What's up, Gremlins? Get out of here. It's too early for you to be in the video.
But I have a funny video for you to watch.
God damn it, who outed themselves as a bigot this time?
Oh no, it's old. You've seen it.
Oh, here's some news. Tucker Carlson can eat shit. Whoa.
I remember this one.
Yeah, but I accidentally went back too far.
Like a bowler.
For Democrats, it's understandable because the calculus is simple. Having abandoned the concerns of the middle class here, they need millions of new voters, and they need them fast. Otherwise, their party risks becoming a permanent minority. Replacing ungrateful citizens with obedient immigrants is their only hope.
Oh, really? You mean like how the GOP has repeatedly campaigned specifically to the nastiest groups of people in order to cultivate the modern brain-dead voter base they have today? Is that the kind of desperation we're discussing today, Tucker?
What the f***, Tucker?
Well, yes, actually. That is exactly what we're talking about today. And with the election coming up in a few months, it's
I knew that would get him started.
Time for a history lesson, my gremlins. What's up, gremlins? I think it's about time we had a talk about the whole partisan politics thing and how it makes sense, actually. A lot of people wonder why there is so much anger and polarization between the Republicans and Democrats, and I think I have a good point of reference for you. Especially since Tucker Carlson here happened to be talking about immigrants and not the gays or abortion. The extreme partisan divide can pretty concretely be traced back to the 1900s. You see, the Republican Party, or the GOP as I sometimes call them, particularly because it's easier to type and not because I don't think calling yourself the Grand Old Party is the most laughably conceited thing I've ever heard.
That's a triple negative!
Anyway, the GOP has a long history of specifically campaigning to appease extreme groups of people that hate... Oh, let me get the list out. Black people, women, gay people, trans people, foreigners, non-Christians, and probably babies, because nobody who is anti-choice actually gives a flying fuck about what happens to a baby after it's born. But you may be asking me,
hey, you fucking SJW libtard, also your avatar scares me. What are you even talking about right now? Also, why isn't that weird sock shouting this at you instead of me?
well, first of all, don't try to call the other me. They're busy in the ceiling dimension. And secondly, I have a riveting story to tell you. You see, there are pretty well-documented times in recent history where the GOP has become desperate for votes and decided that trying to show the people of America that they are the best choice for furthering justice and increasing the quality of life for everyone wasn't viable. They just couldn't risk trying to split voters with the Democrats by appealing to, like, normal people, or even focusing on working with the people in charge at any given time to help improve the country. So instead, they found various groups of people that were afraid of society moving on without them, and united them with delicious ideas such as being allowed to keep hating black people, and keeping women subservient to men, and, injecting laws based on one specific religion into our government. Pick your poison! Just kidding, I'm the only one writing the script, and today the poison is...
American racism!
To start this dive into our history, we're actually going to go back to more nuanced times, when the Democrats and Republicans weren't quite as predictable as they are now, back when it was actually not uncommon to see Republicans who were against slavery and Jim Crow, and who supported the rights of women to govern their own lives. And on the other hand, when we had a lot more Democrats who were overtly racist and opposed social progress. The party divide was a lot less polarized, but that all changed when the Wallace Nation attacked. Okay, I'm mostly joking. Obviously, it wasn't an overnight change based on the actions of one guy. By the way, this video is not a comprehensive analysis of these events. These are summaries meant to help explain the overall happenings and maybe get people interested in researching them further, so please fucking forgive me if I leave out details that might put the average person to sleep. Anyway... You may or may not have heard of the Democrat-Republican switch of ideals, aka the Southern Strategy. I sure as hell didn't know this was a thing until like August of this year, and it's also something that no Republican wants to talk about because they really love saying shit like, the KKK was invented by the Democrats, and racism is leftist actually, and other such clever gotchas. But, guys, this shit is actually juicy. The Southern Strategy took place over time, with people like George Wallace, Barry Goldwater, Richard Nixon, and Lee Atwater being important people driving the goal of using racism and weird euphemisms to appeal to Southern white voters between the early 1960s and the 1980s. See, the Republican Party used to be largely northern-based, whereas the Deep South was controlled by the Democrats. If you read about politics during the 1800s, you may find a huge chunk of the Democratic Party was fucking racist, and pushing policies that mirror what the Republican Party has been caught trying to push today. Like the voter ID laws that were revealed to have been specifically crafted in order to make it much harder for black people in the 2010s to vote. Well, back then it was Democrats doing that shit, which had the unfortunate side effect of ruining the Republicans' ability to get support from the South, because a big chunk of their voters were being disenfranchised. So what did the Republicans do to fix this issue? Did they campaign in favor of the civil rights movement to get their black supporters the right to vote? Did they fight against the racist policies pushed by the Democrats? Did they set the White House on fire? Well, they tried, not that last thing. The answer certainly isn't as simple as no. The Republicans supported anti-lynching bills and tried to appoint black people to political positions, but their efforts were largely ineffective. It actually looked pretty hopeless because of how much power the Democrats had. But then opportunity struck when Democratic President Harry Truman signed an executive order that would desegregate the military, which sparked resistance from a group of conservative Southern Democrats who didn't like seeing civil rights support from their party. This group formed the States' Rights Democratic Party, also known as the Dixiecrat Party, with a goal of maintaining segregation and Jim Crow in the South. And while they failed to really get anything done and ended up dissolving, the split remained, leading to a series of Democratic politicians switching to Republican when the Democratic Party finally started making progress towards civil rights. One such peepo was Strom Thurmond. What kind of fucking name is that? Strom! One such peepo was Strom Thurmond, who was one of the first conservative Southern Democrats to switch to the Republican Party because he didn't like something his party did. You see, it was President Lyndon Johnson, a Democrat, who signed the Civil Rights Act into law in 1964. And Thurmond saw that, and he was like, "I've been a Democrat for over 20 years, and this is how they repay me? Well, fiddlesticks, I'm leaving." Yeah, I'm sure that's how he talked. And what might be throwing you off at the moment, especially if you've heard some conservative liars talk about this, is the obvious fact that the Republicans weren't asking Strom Thurmond to join them because they were secretly racist and just needed one more Republican before they could come out of their shell or something. The GOP isn't some sentient force of nature that brainwashes progressives and sucks them into racism. Where's the strategy in this story? And calm your T-words, you impatient B-words. You see, this right here is the history behind the Southern strategy, what many people consider the roots of what would later happen. It wasn't that the Republican Party was already super racist and already trying to suck in other racists. It was more that they were so ineffective at this time, regardless of their positions, that by the time they got the chance to become relevant again, they had already been infiltrated by parasites, some of whom saw that the Democratic Party was slowly beginning to support desegregation and decided that rather than fight to keep their party the way it had been, they would just jump ship and take over the empty shell on the other side. The first major politician in our story to start campaigning for racist ideas was actually another Democrat named George Wallace. Wallace was one of the special ones, the kind of terrible that would make your subconsciously racist grandpa or even your Trump-supporting mom say, "Yikes, man." Wallace used the classic states' rights euphemism to push for segregation and even collaborated with the KKK in 1963 to disrupt court-ordered integration of public schools in Birmingham. By the way, the KKK was bombing people. However, at this time, George Wallace was merely a governor content to disturb the fabric of goodness in Alabama. So where did the people that loved him look to make their policies a reality?
Ooh, do your present mic voice!
Duh, come on, turn on the radio filter.
Welcome, ladies, boys, and NBs, to the fight for the Republican presidential candidate of 1964! On one end of the stadium, we have Senator Barry Goldwater, the representative of states' rights and racial discrimination, versus Governor Nelson Rockefeller, representing the more moderate, pro-civil rights wing of the party. Which of these red elephants will take the win and become the most powerful man in the country? Vote now on your giant mobile bell systems!
This segment has been brought to you by This Was Unnecessary because neither one of them won the presidency. But the Southern Democrats loved Goldwater, and he was in fact the first Republican presidential candidate since Reconstruction to win the electoral votes of the Deep South states. He transparently supported basically all forms of federal rights legislation, except the Civil Rights Act, because suddenly that was an infringement on the rights of states to choose their own standards, and the rights of business owners to do business with whom they wanted. It's a tale as old as time. People should be allowed to keep certain people from being able to buy groceries just because their skin is a different color. It's freedom. It won't lead to any extreme unneeded suffering. Not at all. The This voice is fucking stupid. On the opposite side of things, the Democratic Party started to attract black voters after the Civil Rights Act was passed. But honestly, the majority of the country supported the act. The only people that didn't support it was, of course, the racists in the South, who rejected anyone from either party if they supported any civil rights plank. Plank being a word I discovered while researching this topic. No, not that plank. Plank as in the beliefs that make up the thing you mentioned. I'm sure you can guess what the civil rights plank was. This was the deal breaker for the Southerners, and one Richard Nixon took notice of that and saw it as an opportunity to steal the election. Taking some inspiration from George Wallace, he too got on the states' rights train and also added a new euphemism, that being the idea of law and order, which sounded vague but specifically referred to the silencing of protests and also stopping hippies from doing the drugs and having the sex. Nothing to do with actually keeping the streets safe by catching criminals. This ain't no Judy Hopps story, there is no justice to see here. And to make that even more obvious, and not a liberal conspiracy, resident White House dude H.R. Haldeman literally stated that Nixon emphasized that you have to face the fact that the whole problem is really the blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognized this while not appearing to. And this isn't the only confirmation of dog whistling that was recorded. But for now, oh look, it's George fucking Wallace again, running against Nixon with a more overtly racist platform and winning most of Goldwater's states. I wonder why. This to me is hilarious because Nixon managed to get some of the black vote by appearing moderate outside of the South. And I mean, who could blame anyone for choosing the let the states decide guy over the keep these black people out of my store guy? Oh, and also that Thurman people who switched to the Republican Party 4 years ago joined Nixon to help him perfect his racist dog whistles. But forget about him. The guy people really remember is Lee Atwater, probably because he was recorded saying something pretty fucking spicy in an interview which produced this infamous quote.
Here's how I would approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, and now y'all aren't quoting me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying by 1968 you can't say that hurts your backfire, so you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than So any way you look at it, race is coming on the back burner.
Well, look at that, y'all. Are you starting to smell the strategy yet? Because, we're not done. The next big bozo that grabbed the implicit racism ball was Ronald Reagan, who sure did create an original OC Do Not Steal called the Welfare Queen, depicting a lady who used multiple names to abuse the welfare system and collect tons of money that wasn't hers. Oh, what's that? Republicans nowadays are notorious for accusing anyone who needs government help of demanding handouts that they don't deserve. What else is that? This stereotype is disproportionately thrown at immigrants and black people? I wonder if it's because the Welfare Queen was another method of making the public distrust black people. Whoa, look at that! Lee Atwater is back, and this time he's whispering in George W. Bush's ear. He and Roger Ailes...
Roger Ailes.
Yeah, that. He and Roger Ailes, both acting as Bush's political strategists, ran the Willie Horton attack ads to sling shit at Bush's Democratic opponent, Michael Dukakis. Willie Horton was a convicted rapist and murderer who happened to be black and whose rape victim was a white woman. The absolute perfect caricature for rapists. The absolute perfect caricature for racists to copy and paste onto every single other black person they knew of, because obviously his race is what we should focus on, not the fact that he did a stabbing and a rape. The things people from all walks of life are capable of doing, and some of which plenty of white people, Democrat or Republican, have done and gotten away with. But let's not worry about that. Isn't this man scary? Isn't he menacing? Is this what you want? If you elect Michael Dukakis, the goddamn liberal, he'll let these aggressive, violent criminals loose on the streets. Elect George W. Bush, though, and he'll make sure the death penalty awaits these criminals. These criminals, of course, meaning any dark-skinned person that paranoid Southern belles want to accuse of crimes. Don't even get me started. We know this exact thing happens today. What do you think we're living through? But we've also seen President Trump pull this exact same thing against Mexicans, and it's amazing how more people don't see how damaging stuff like this can be to a demographic of people. By taking the absolute worst members of a demographic and memeing the shit out of them to scare the masses, you put every person of that demographic in danger. And Republicans do this constantly. They do it with immigrants, they do it with trans people, they do it with fucking atheists and dogs, you name it. They hate you, and they want everyone else to hate you too, and to fear the irreparable damage you'll do to their perfect Southern lifestyle by having the right to exist in the same spaces as them. That's what Jesse Helms thought anyways. He described affirmative action as companies having a racial quota, and stoked people's white victimization complex with an ad that showed white hands crumbling a job letter indicating they hadn't gotten the job because of this, ignoring the fact that we had and still have a long way to go before affirmative action won't be needed anymore. If it wasn't a thing, a lot less black people would get hired, which, yes, my dudes, is backed up by studies. Some people say that the Southern strategy never ended, but rather that it has evolved in a way. And that's absolutely true. If you look at the ways bigots try to discourage social progress, their tactics can be broken down to the same fucking things every time. Fear-mongering, misrepresenting facts, pretending that elevating marginalized groups to their level will hurt the privileged, using vague language to mask their clear bigoted intent, outright lying. When Obama was elected, conservatives started saying that that was proof of a post-racial era. One Thomas Edge described it like this: "First, according to the arguments, a nation that has the ability to elect a black president is completely free of racism. Second, attempts to continue the remedies enacted after the civil rights movement will only result in more racial discord, demagoguery, and racism against white Americans. Third, these tactics are used side by side with the veiled racism and coded language of the original Southern strategy." After Bush's re-election, his campaign manager, Ken Mellman, apologized on behalf of the GOP for their use of the Southern strategy to court voters in the past. He described it pretty well, actually, and said that they were wrong for using racial tensions to get votes and for ignoring black voters. But the Southern strategy never ended. It is still happening. Some of their tactics have just changed. Nowadays, rather than ignore black people altogether, they try to manipulate them into believing that racism really is over and that black people today are just whiners. They use grifters like Candace Owens to play identity politics while lying through her teeth.
And the myth of things like the Southern switch and the Southern strategy, which never happened.
I shit you not, I found this clip while researching for this video and I lost my shit laughing at the timing. Republicans really do want to pretend that the Southern strategy never happened, because remember, George Wallace was a Democrat, the left are the real racists, and black people just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Okay, but no, seriously. These people know that they will be outnumbered and phased out if they play fair. They're the rejected meatballs of society, making it sick at every turn, and if they don't claw their way back up society's throat and constantly come up with new slimy ways to get what they want, their beliefs will become so widely condemned that they'll never have power again. Bigots have always known this, because they know they're wrong and that their beliefs are not based in facts, so their only hope of continuing to have any relevance is to brainwash people. So where does this leave me? Honestly, ever since the Southern strategy began, bigots have continued to gather in tighter balls and pull more people into their ideology. And by that, I'm not just talking about racism. Like, I want to make sure you understand something. If for some reason learning about the Southern strategy isn't enough for you, they have also done this to keep women from having equal rights, and they have commandeered the Christian religion and purposely attached sentiments against abortion rights and LGBTQ people to religious purity. That's where the term family values comes from, or traditional family, or any of that shit. It's a dog whistle against non-nuclear families, gay people, secularism, sex in general, etc. Conservatism is a baseless and toxic ideology. Everything they say, everything they stand for, is rooted in bigotry. So to my audience, I beg you, I need you to understand this. If you in any way support the Republican Party today, you need to reevaluate yourself. I'm not joking, I'm not exaggerating. Bigots have fully gutted what the Republican Party used to be at this point, and they have made it their hive of bad intentions. The GOP is the haven of the vile. So if you believe yourself to be a good person, but you see appeal in Republican policies, I would start self-reflecting. And if you know someone who is willing to vote Republican today, know that they are doing harm to society, regardless of how kind they are in other aspects. And let me be clear, okay? Democrats can be assholes too. There are racist, homophobic, shitty Dems. A lot of Democratic nominees are fucking horrendous people. The difference? Being a Democrat is not indicative of bad ideals. A Democrat can be a bad person just like a gay person can be a bad person. Being gay is not indicative of bad things, and being gay doesn't mean you're a good person. Voting Republican or supporting conservative ideals is a red flag. It means something is wrong with that person's judgment, and if they aren't simply uninformed and willing to learn, then they're just broken. Because anyone who would ignore shit like what I've talked about is either incredibly stupid, misinformed, or a fucking sociopath. Yes, even your adorable sweet grandma. If she votes red, that hurts people. If she teaches her kids that there's anything wrong with being gay, or that black people are scary, or that anyone has any right to control whether someone else gets an abortion, passing those beliefs on is dangerous. It is toxic. It makes the world worse. Now, I'm not telling you to disown these people. That's not my choice to make. I have family, they have shitty views, and I love them dearly, and I would kill for them. However, my love doesn't negate the harm they do. It doesn't mean I'll ever defend their views, and it doesn't mean their views aren't a red flag against their character. You finished? Yeah, almost. I had like a really satisfying rant to end the video on, but I'm hesitant to even keep it in because the people I'm ranting to don't want to fix things. But, I guess I'll still do it for the sake of any Republicans in my audience who truly want to be good people, but don't understand the vitriol against them from the left. Because as a former Christian, I understand completely where their confusion comes from. There was a time when I was in high school and I was still a Christian, and I was sitting at the table with a bunch of people who were like either gay or some form of LGBT, and they were obviously supportive of that too, and they would get really, really mad at people who would say like, you know, being gay is against the Bible or it's a sin or something. Like, they would get really mad. And I didn't understand why, because like in my head I was like, well, isn't Christianity like this loving religion where like you're just happy all the time and like it's supposed to help you, blah blah blah. Like I did not understand why, and now I do, because I realize now that I'm a fucking adult that just passing those beliefs on is enough to cause damage to the world and the people who are affected by those. It's not just an opinion. It's not saying I don't like apples, because saying I don't like apples is not going to delete all the apple trees in the world. It's not going to keep people from planting them, or whatever. So, anyone who makes the argument that it's hypocritical of me to impugn Republicans because I'm also willing to vote for shitlords like Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton because they're the lesser of two evils has misunderstood my message. Nobody is saying that Democrats are perfect. In fact, anyone who thinks that is an idiot. But what I am saying is that the Republican Party has been consistently terrible. So maybe next time you want to complain that the left and the liberal media keep calling Republicans racist and homophobic and misogynistic, maybe instead complain about the fact that Republicans have historically grabbed all those labels for themselves and held onto them with a vice grip. Maybe stop doing and saying things that are bigoted on a daily basis. Maybe stop excusing sex offenders and murderers because you like their homophobia and misogyny. Maybe follow in the footsteps of people like Nelson Rockefeller and Mary Crisp and try to fix your broken party. Maybe then I'll stop associating Republican with conservative and conservative with bigot. Get out of here!